The best response you can have to a payoff in a thriller is someone goes, "Oh, right, I forgot. Of course, I should have."
On Story offers a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. All of our content is recorded live at Austin Film Festival and at our year-round events. To view previous episodes, visit onstory.tv. On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. Support for On Story comes from Bogle Family Vineyards, 6th-generation farmers and 3rd-generation winemakers, creating sustainably grown wines that are a reflection of the Bogle family values since 1968. From Austin Film Festival, this is On Story, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. This week's On Story, American Horror Story Roanoke writer-producer Akela Cooper and Bloodfest writer-director Owen Egerton.
You know, one of the things I love about horror and comedy is they are the two genres that thrive on an audible response from an audience, an uncontrolled audible response from an audience. It's a laugh or it's a scream, and they're both similar. That's why horror and comedy are so fun to watch with a crowd, because we all scream at the same time.
In this episode, horror writers Akela Cooper and Owen Egerton discuss their love for the genre, setups and payoffs, emotional scares, and inspirational moments from classic horror films.
I was reminded recently of a 12th century poem that Scott Frank quotes in Godless on Netflix, which is not horror, but kind of, that opens, "'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch." And I'm curious, as people and as writers, what fearful things resonate with you, and in horror, and specifically with your characters?
Interesting enough, I'm always fascinated in film and in novels and stories overall when one person's expectation of how the world or an event or relationship is meets up with the actuality of what it really is. Like, I think the world is just, and then you meet the reality that it's not just. Or I think my spouse is faithful, and then not. Or even just sort of the strange belief, I'm immortal. So I think when my beliefs are shattered in every kind of way, that was what terrifies me the most. And I think with those scares, with those fears, for me, they don't have answers. It's not like, and then at the end we realize it's okay. No, it's being alive is scary, and being in love with the world is terrifying because it's all very fragile and can be ripped away from you.
I think for me, a lot of my horror comes from the fact that I am like a black woman in the world, and a lot of it's like body horror, like having something inside me that I am unable to control and I did not invite in, or even like my personal space, i.e. my home. That is constantly terrifying to me. It's like I recently just moved and I had to get a security system for the first time. And it's like listening to another woman who down the street, her home invasion, which was very quick, but it was captured on camera. And she was showing it to me, and it's like they just, broke the windows and came in, and it was a smash and grab. But I'm just like, oh God, this was down the street from me. This is down the street from me. What's gonna happen to me? And then planting various blunt objects around my house, just in case I have to grab something. I am a very personal. It's I have my space. Do not invade my space unless I invite you in. So those are the kind of horrors that keep me up at night.
A college, privileged fraternity kid being pulled over by the cops could be a comedy scene, but if it's an African American, it takes on a whole other context of horror, potentially, unfortunately, because of the real world we live in, and that there's so many situations, circumstances right now, and it's interesting to see some of this beginning to be tackled more directly in genre and film that are more mindful of those distinctions of race and class when it comes to different situations that can really jump entire genres. And I'm curious, as sort of observers, consumers of the medium and the genre, but also as writers in the thick of it, what you've observed and what your instincts are.
Well, for me, just like as a black horror writer, Get Out was a revelation. Yeah. Because like I finally had a movie that I could point to when I am pitching my own things to producers. It's like, see, we can make money like telling our stories and acting in our stories. So stop telling me I can't. But it's like I just noticed a personal change after Get Out came that like even like a lot of the white studio producers were like, so your horror is going to speak to a social commentary, right? Right?
Horror has always had the ability to kind of be our nightmares that we have as a culture, right? And our dreams that we have as a culture. So we're like, what's going on in our world? And it's going to get all mixed up. It's just like when you go to sleep and you're like, oh, they're all the elements from your daily life. Like there's your gym coach from 9th grade, and there's that girl that you never had the guts to talk to in college, but they're all hanging out at the same coffee shop where your father died. All these things in one place, and you don't really kind of make sense of it. And I think horror can be like that. Horror has all the elements that are going on in our day-to-day, whether it's gun violence, whether it's no longer trusting the American system that we were taught to trust, or whether it's seeing disparity in wealth, and those things kind of mingle together in our stories that we're writing.
I would like to kind of travel back in time to when you were staying up late under the covers, reading a book or a comic, or sneaking into a movie you shouldn't have seen when you were too young. What was sort of your gateway drug to horror and genre that helped form you and spark your imagination and passion for it?
My mom is going to kill me for this, but like my introduction to horror was pretty much my brother and sister. I grew up on a farm in southeastern Missouri, so my brother and sister were essentially my free babysitters. And my sister was 10 years older than me, and she loved watching horror movies. So I remember her putting on like A Nightmare on Elm Street. Hellraiser 2 was a particular favorite. And my very first request was Pumpkinhead, which was directed by Stan Winston. When it came out, it was put in just like dollar theaters across the country. My parents saw it. They came home raving about it. My brother and his friend wanted to go see it, and my parents were like, sure. And I was 7 years old. And I'm like, ooh, I want to go too, because you keep saying how good this movie is. And my parents is like, you know. So they take me and they drop me off at my grandma's house, and they're pulling away, and I'm like in the doorway, just like, car stops, backs up, my brother gets out, comes back to the door and is like, come on. And so years later, I asked my mom, I was like, why did you turn the car around? And she said, because I look back and you look so sad. It broke my heart. And joke was on her, because if you've seen Pumpkinhead, 10 minutes into that movie, hits the fan. And I was on her lap. So my first impression of Pumpkinhead was my mom's armpit.
Why doesn't Daddy let the man in? He can't, buddy. He just can't.
Get away from my door. Get away from me and my family.
Oh, please. You gotta help me, Tom. It's coming. I didn't kill that girl.
I don't know nothing about that, and I don't want to.
I said I did, Tom, but I didn't.
No, I'm sorry, I am. But I can't risk my family for you, Clayton. Now, I got my shotgun here. Get away. Get away before I have to use it.
It was thrilling to me in a very addictive way. Pumpkinhead was pretty much the needle into the arm that got me like truly into horror.
Wow. My kids are a little older now, but I'm going to try and take them to Pumpkinhead. It's a delightful Thanksgiving story.
Where a child dies.
Where a child dies, yeah. Ooh. So for me, it was like I grew up in the '80s and with video stores. So I would go like to the video store, the local. It wasn't even a Blockbuster. It was just like a crappy little video store. And I would read the back covers of every different horror movie. I was like, what is this? Chopping Mall? What? And the covers were all amazing, and that amazed me. And I would then there would come on TV. But I remember a few specific things that really like, oh my God, this is amazing. One of them was. Watching late night television where I think my family had gone to this cabin. So my parents were in a loft upstairs and everyone else had gone to sleep, and I stayed up late and watched Night of the Living Dead, the original. And I was watching this and I was like, okay, kind of corny and kind of black. Oh my God, they're eating flesh. And I was a little kid and I was terrified. And if you remember the basement scene where the mother is murdered with the dead daughter using oh my God, I was just killing me.
Baby. Baby.
And I remember thinking, I'm not allowed to watch this. I'm not allowed to watch this. But I loved it. And I couldn't turn it off. When I did turn it off, I was like laying there, and in the living room under a blanket. I was like, I'm just hearing the moaning and hearing the sounds of moaning of the zombies. I'm not gonna be able to sleep. I realized that was actually my parents making love in the loft above. And sorry, my daughter's here, so she's learned something about her grandparents. But I think the combination of all that was like horror in so many ways.
Owen, of course, you work in comedy, and I want to talk kind of about engineering in the horror genre, and that there's similarities to comedy in terms of setups and payoffs.
Most
of kind
certainly.
of tension and release.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can speak to how you approach kind of that nuts and bolts kind of mechanics of the genre.
One of the things I love about horror and comedy is they are the two genres that thrive on an audible response from an audience, an uncontrolled audible response from an audience. It's a laugh or it's a scream, and they're both similar. That's why horror and comedy are so fun to watch with a crowd, because we all scream at the same time. A joke is very much of like a setup an expectation, and then that expectation is subverted. And that's how jokes work, and we love them for that. And a jump scare is very similar in the same way of like setting up an expectation of what's going to be behind that door, but then, James Wan grabs you in the face. And it's set up an expectation, and they're both like using the time, using the steps. They are orchestrated. They are put together. If done well, they're put together like a puzzle, like a really finely pieced puzzle, especially even when you're filming it. And working, with Blumhouse and Atomic Monster, same way of like, these folks have had a lot of experience in jump scares and how to orchestrate those kind of scares, how to make sure there's emotion in them and not just a cat jumping at your face. Though that would be great. I think cats are scary.
Yeah, when I'm writing, it's like I'm not necessarily thinking about like the jump scare, the construction, because I know it's like, yes, once a director takes this, they're gonna make it their own thing and they might tweak something or change something. I'm usually like on the page, it's like, I know the build-up is what I focus on, and like one of my favorite things now is like that we're all like, I recently watched Scream again, and I was like Instagramming. It's like the birth of self-aware horror. So like on the page now, I'm just like the attic door like suddenly comes open and the ladder comes down and she's looking up, and I was like, do not go in there. She goes in there. And so I know a director is going to do something wonderful with that construction. It's like, I don't necessarily have to be like, oh, here comes the jump scare, like, as I'm writing.
Right, yeah.
That sets up the next question perfectly, which is how horror, I think in particular, is wrapped up in the context of its own genre, at least as much as any other genre, in terms of knowing that the audience is conditioned with a certain set of expectations and a framework of awareness of what the rules of the genre are. And so how do you kind of both be aware of that, but find a fresh approach when, for example, one of the tropes is characters making stupid choices? How mindful of you are of everything that's come before you and been done in the genre, and trying to find new ways in or new approaches to subvert those expectations the audience has been conditioned to?
The horror community is so fun, and I think it's one of the things I love about horror. I love the idea that we can talk about Pumpkinhead, everyone's like, oh yeah! Like we have this sort of love of the genres, and as Cargill likes to say, who wrote Sinister and Doctor Strange, he likes to talk about horror ages so well too. Like, bad movies become cheesy and charming, and good movies become classics. Like, just give it 10 years, and all of a sudden, like a throwaway horror movie is like, oh, but it's so good. And I think it's great because we do have this working vocabulary that we all know. So there are things that we kind of like, oh yeah, we know this. We know what that means. We know that little kid's gonna kill somebody. Yep. We know these things. I think the key is, for me, is like, I am a fan of the uncanny. When something happens in a film, like, think about Phantasm and a finger alone, like squirreling around. It's like, that finger's not gonna get me. There's nothing scary about the finger. I'm not threatened by the finger. I'm upset by the finger because it shouldn't be moving. It's uncanny. And when the uncanny happens in horror, it's particularly beautiful. It's something different. It doesn't necessarily make you scream. Maybe it's a setup for a scream, but it makes you feel the world is not as it should be. And that feeling of the world not being as it should be is a key aspect of living and a key aspect of horror. And so for me, that's a constant rediscovery of like, okay, what does it mean? I mean, the slashers that I grew up in did a great job of dismantling what I thought was a safe world. Like, the world's safe. Suburbia's safe. Oh no, Michael Myers comes to Suburbia. Well, summer camp. Now that's safe. Oh, no, it's not. How about dolls? Dolls, like talking dolls? No, they're not. All right. My dreams, at least in my dreams, oh my God. So there's like, how do we go to the places that we have an expectation of, the world, a relationship, a situation, and how do we twist it so its uncanniness is revealed? And that uncanniness, I think that's where you find the horror and maybe the dread.
Same, like, I am also a fan of the uncanny. Like, the scariest things I've ever seen is actually not even in a movie. It's the screen test that they did with Javier Botet for Mama.
Mama, oh my God.
Oh, sorry, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crew on a soundstage. He's in the costume, just doing the movement, and it's kind of in black and white. It is unnerving just watching it. And again, they're crew all around, and it's like, oh, okay, doing a screen test. It's just like, oh, no, it's because his movements are so unnatural. Yeah. And it's like, and he did a very good job in that movie. To your question, it's like, it's difficult now because we all know this, like, with a lot of horror movies, like, technology is the problem. But I tend to kind of like, okay, it's like, we know what the issue is. How can we subvert it? How can we challenge it? So you have a situation where a character is like near an elevator door, and there's like a dark door at the hallway. Something is like breathing inside. Just go to the elevator. Turns around. Elevator needs a key. Where is the key? It's in front of that door. Now, you have that character. Book it. And is he gonna get to the elevator key before whatever's in that dark doorway comes out? That's the kind of stuff that I like to do with horror. It's like, we know the situation, now just challenge the character.
It all comes down to being invested and caring about that character, identifying with them of what they're going through, to have that connection, and for all these scares and moments to really resonate with an audience. How do you go about sort of creating, crafting, engineering that? And what are some examples in films, whether recent or in the past, that you have particularly connected with the characters of in horror, and why do you think that was?
Yeah, I did this podcast called The Horror with my a former writing partner, Russell Sharman. Russell Sharman does not like horror movies, so he said, challenge me to watch a horror movie every 2 weeks, and then I will tell you why it's bad, and you can tell me why you think it's good. So we do this, and it's really fun, and I found out that he just doesn't like being scared, which I thought, like, yeah, you do, everyone does. Well, it turns out some people don't. But we watched Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, because I thought it was the most Friday the 13th-y of those films. And in that one, you know, Crispin Gloven's in it, and there's teenagers, and there's skinny dipping, and they're all this, and it was all that fun stuff. And I was like, oh, it's interesting. The sort of general idea in culture is like, it's the morality play. Like, if the teenagers have sex, the slasher goes to kill them. But I was watching it again, I was like, no, they're having a blast. Everyone's having a good time. The mom with her kids are having fun. People are caring about each other. And I was like, oh, it sparked a revelation for me of like, you've got to have as much life as death in your horror movie. You have to have as much life as you do death. That means people who are honestly caring about each other. That means people who are striving for something in their life, not just survival. And that, for me, it was like, oh, that was a revelation.
I would say there are a couple. The first one that comes to mind is Paranormal Activity, that goes to the personal space, and also the, like, what happens when you're sleeping, when you're at your most vulnerable. And it's like, would I want a camera? No, I don't. No, for various reasons. But it's like, yeah, I don't need to know. If something is like sneaking around, you know, a specter, you can just don't bother me. I'll be fine. Another one, which also goes to personal space, is The Guest, which, if you haven't seen that movie, is an amazing movie. Again, you invite someone into your home, treat them well, and then, spoiler alert, they turn on you and start killing you. So it's stuff like that. And then the last one that really affected me, just because like it just inspired so many debates among me and my friends, was It Follows. Because for most of us, like, we either remember what it was like to be a stupid, horny teenager, or we're there. And so it's like...
Did you just point at my daughter?
I did not. I don't know where your daughter is.
My gosh.
Oh.
I'm sure she's so glad she's here.
But yeah, it's like I really invested in those characters, and like her plight. It's just like, oh my God, how do you get rid of like a demon STD? That sucks. And then like after the movie, we're like, you know what I would do? I would fly to Australia, have sex with someone in Australia, and see how long it would take. Like, and it was like those kind of things. But it's like it had been a long time since like after the movie we were just like having drinks and like having an intense debate about like the logic of the movie and what we would do if we were in that situation, which means we connected with those characters.
Oh my God. I just walked in the room. It's right there.
It's here?
Right there. Jay, what do you see? I don't want to tell you.
Jay, I need you to point at it, okay? Keep your finger aimed at it so we can see where it is. Is it getting in the water?
It's just standing there staring at me. It's moving. What's it doing? It's walking. It's just walking. Paul, I want to get out.
No, just wait for it to get in.
No, I don't want to do this. I just want to get out. Jake!
Get out of there!
Ah! She's gonna get electrocuted.
I think about this too. Whenever I'm making a character, writing a character, and I'm working through it, I have to at some point stop myself and go, okay, wait a second. This character, two things: what do they want and what do they need? And I always think of those that are usually the opposite from each other, right? They usually want something. You know, Tom Cruise in Top Gun. You know, I want to be the best pilot in the Navy, sir. Like, he's asked, he says it out like, what do you want, Maverick? What do you want? Like, I want to be the best pilot in the Navy, sir. So that's what he wants. That's really clear. What does he need? Well, clearly he needs to, like, you know, be in collaboration with other people and learn that he can be a wingman who stays on the wing of the guy. I'm not leaving. You know, he needs to learn that, which is it's the opposite of what the character says. You know, so if Schwarzenegger says, I'm a lone wolf, I work alone, we know he's going to have a kindergarten kid going, I'm your new partner. So it always is the opposite of what they say. So I think I have to know that. And if I don't know what they want and what they need, then I have to step away and figure that out.
You've been watching On Writing Horror on Story. On Story is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's On Story project that also includes the On Story radio program, podcast, book series, and the On Story archive, accessible through the Whitliff Collections at Texas State University. To find out more about On Story and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com. Want to see On Story live? Join us at Austin Film Festival's annual Writers' Conference each October. Visit www.austinfilmfestival.com to find out more about badges and passes to attend the festival.